Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The night air over Hogwarts was colder than usual, as if the castle itself sensed something stirring within its ancient stones. The moon hung low above the towers, spilling a silver mist across the grounds, and the forbidden forest rustled with uneasy whispers. Somewhere deep inside the castle, a door creaked open all by itself, slowly, reluctantly, as if it had been locked for hundreds of years. Albus Potter sat awake in the Gryffindor common room, staring into the dying embers of the fire. His quill lay forgotten beside a half-finished essay on transfiguration. The warmth of the fire had faded, but he didn't notice. He couldn't stop thinking about the rumors spreading through the school. A new ghost had been seen wandering the dungeons, a ghost that wasn't like the others. Everyone knew the familiar spirits of Hogwarts: nearly headless Nick, always polite, always slightly exasperated when anyone asked about his unfortunate decapitation; the Grey Lady, quiet and sorrowful, gliding through the library in silence; the Fat Friar, cheerful and kind; and of course the Bloody Baron, who never spoke of his past, his robes forever stained with silvery blood. But this ghost was different. First-year students whispered of hearing screams in the night, echoing through the stone corridors below the great hall. Suits of armor shuddered and clanged as if someone had brushed past them. Tapestries fluttered, though no wind stirred. Even Peeves, who normally delighted in frightening students, had gone oddly quiet. The strangest thing of all was what the Bloody Baron had done. He had abandoned the dungeons entirely. "Scared him off, they say," muttered James Potter at breakfast that morning, his fork stabbing into a sausage. A ghost scaring another ghost. That's something new. Albus had laughed then, but the sound of it felt hollow. He'd seen the Baron himself, hovering near the staircases leading to the Slytherin dormitories, eyes wild, muttering to himself in some old tongue. And when Albus had tried to ask what was wrong, the ghost had turned and hissed, "Do not go below." Then he had vanished through the wall. Now, sitting by the dying fire, Albus couldn't shake the chill those words left behind. The clock struck midnight. The fire gave one last flicker, and the portrait hole swung open. "Still awake?" came a voice from behind. Albus turned to see Rose Weasley, his cousin, wrapped in a blanket and holding a flickering lantern. Her red hair glowed like molten copper in the dim light. "You're not still thinking about that ghost nonsense, are you?" she asked, stepping inside. "It's not nonsense," Albus said. "You heard what Peeves told Filch. The Dark One's back. He's been floating around the astronomy tower screaming that for days." "Peeves says all sorts of rubbish," Rose said, sitting down beside him. "Last year, he swore Professor Longbottom was a werewolf." Before Albus could reply, another voice spoke from the shadows by the window. "Actually," it said softly, "I don't think Peeves is joking this time." It was Scorpius Malfoy. Pale as parchment, his eyes gleamed with reflected moonlight. He stepped forward, clutching a rolled-up piece of parchment. "I've been in the library," he said, spreading it open on the table. "I found this in the restricted section." Rose frowned. "You went into the restricted section again?" Scorpius ignored her. Look. The parchment was old, so old the ink had faded to brown. Across its cracked surface, faint lines showed a map of the castle's lower levels, some of which no one had seen in centuries. There, Scorpius said, pointing to a dark corner beneath the Slytherin common room. It's called the Chamber of Echoes. It's not on any modern map. Rose leaned in closer. I've never heard of it. That's because it's sealed, Scorpius replied. According to the note in the margin, it was closed by Salazar Slytherin himself after something happened. Albus felt the air in the room grow colder. Something happened? Scorpius nodded. It doesn't say what. Only that the thief was punished beyond death. The fire crackled faintly, and for a moment none of them spoke. The castle seemed to sigh around them, a deep, ancient breath. Rose broke the silence. If that chamber really exists, we should tell Professor McGonagall. No, Albus said quickly. She'd never let us near it. And besides, he hesitated. If this ghost really is connected to it, someone has to find out what's going on before another student gets hurt. Scorpius smirked faintly. You mean, before you get hurt, Potter? But fine. I'm in. Rose sighed, pulling the blanket tighter. You two are impossible. But if you're going, you'll need someone with sense. I'm coming too. Albus smiled. Tomorrow night, then. We meet at the entrance to the dungeons. Bring your wands. As the others slipped back to their dormitories, Albus lingered by the fire a moment longer. He stared into the glowing coals until they looked like eyes staring back, somewhere deep below the castle, in the darkness, beneath the dungeons. Something stirred, something old and full of grief. And far away in a forgotten corridor sealed by centuries of dust, a whisper rose from the shadows. They should not have come. The flames flickered once as though the castle itself shivered. The night of discovery had begun. The following day passed in a blur of lessons and whispers. Hogwarts felt different now, tense, listening. The enchanted ceiling in the great hall hung low with storm clouds, and thunder rolled faintly above the students' heads during breakfast. Even the candles seemed dimmer than usual, their flames shivering as if disturbed by an unseen wind. By evening, the rain had begun in earnest. The windows rattled, and long trails of water streaked down the glass. Albus, Rose, and Scorpius met in the corridor outside the Gryffindor common room just before curfew, cloaks pulled tightly around their shoulders. Got everything? Albus whispered. Scorpius tapped his wand against his sleeve. Wand, light, and courage. Though I wouldn't mind some chocolate frogs for luck. Rose rolled her eyes. You'll be wishing for more than that by the time we reach the dungeons. She held up a small satchel. I brought something better? One of Professor Longbottom's illuminating leaves? They shine brighter than Lumos. The trio set off down the marble staircase, their footsteps echoing softly. The corridors were eerily silent. Portraits slept in their frames, and not even Peeves floated in sight. The only sound was the distant, steady drip of water somewhere deep within the castle walls. As they neared the entrance to the dungeons, the air grew colder. The torches along the walls flickered, burning blue instead of gold. A chill mist coiled around their ankles. This is it, Scorpius murmured. The map said the passage should be somewhere near the old potion storeroom. They turned down a narrow corridor seldom used now, the stones slick with age. Rose held up the glowing leaf, its soft light painting the walls in silver green. At the far end stood a heavy iron door, one Albus had never noticed before. It was half hidden behind a tapestry of a sleeping basilisk, its eyes sewn shut with black thread. Albus pushed the tapestry aside. The door loomed before them, covered in runes carved so deep they seemed to breathe. "That's it," Scorpius whispered, excitement and fear mingling in his voice. "The Chamber of Echoes." He raised his wand. "Alohomora." The spell struck the lock with a sharp spark, but the door did not open. Instead, a whisper filled the corridor. A voice, faint but cold, spoke from behind the metal. "Who disturbs the silence?" The words were not heard so much as felt, vibrating through their bones. Rose stumbled backward, clutching Albus's sleeve. "Maybe this is a bad idea," she whispered. Albus swallowed hard. "We've come this far. We can't stop now." He stepped forward, hand trembling slightly as he placed it against the door. "We're students of Hogwarts," he said quietly. "We mean no harm." For a long moment nothing happened. Then the runes began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter, until they blazed with a greenish light. The lock gave a loud click. The door creaked open. A gust of cold, stale air rushed out, carrying the scent of damp stone and something older, something like sorrow. They entered slowly, wands raised. The room beyond was vast, larger than they had expected. The ceiling disappeared into darkness, and ancient stone pillars lined the walls. The floor was covered with a thin layer of water that reflected the flickering light of their spells. In the center of the chamber stood a cracked marble pedestal, its surface etched with the sigil of a serpent coiled around a mirror. "What is this place?" Rose breathed. Scorpius crouched beside the pedestal, brushing dust away with his sleeve. "It's not in any record. Whatever this was, it's been erased." Albus's eyes drifted upward to where faint shapes seemed to hover in the shadows near the ceiling, shapes that moved when the light shifted. "Did you see that?" he whispered. Before either of them could answer, the temperature dropped sharply. Their breath misted in the air. A faint cry echoed through the chamber, soft like a sigh, but it carried a sorrow so deep it made their hearts ache. Then they saw it. A figure formed out of the darkness, a ghostly outline shimmering into view above the pedestal. It was tall, draped in what looked like old student robes, torn and stained. Its face was pale and shifting, as though it couldn't decide which shape to wear. Rose gasped. "Who are you?" The ghost did not answer at once. Its head turned toward them slowly, and when it spoke, the sound was distant and hollow, like words carried through a long tunnel. "I was forgotten." Albus took a cautious step forward. "Forgotten by who?" The ghost's eyes glowed faintly like dying embers. "By all, by those who feared what I became. I tried to claim what was not mine, and now I am bound." Scorpius swallowed. "You tried to claim what?" The figure drifted closer, and for a moment the air seemed to twist around it. "The mirror of serpents," it whispered, "the relic of Slytherin. It showed truth and lies alike. I sought to prove myself worthy, but I was deceived." Rose exchanged a glance with Albus. "You mean you were a student here?" The ghost nodded slowly. "Long ago, before your families were born, before the Chamber of Secrets was sealed." The sound of distant thunder rolled through the stone. "Then what happened?" Albus asked softly. The ghost's expression darkened. "Betrayal," it said simply. "My dearest friend led me to ruin, And so the founder cursed me to remain here unseen, unheard, until one born of all 4 houses came to release me. The 3 students fell silent. The only sound was the soft dripping of water. Albus's mind raced. Born of all 4 houses, he murmured. My mum was Gryffindor, my dad too. Rose, you're Gryffindor, but your mum was Muggle-born, and your dad was from Slytherin. And Scorpius, your family's all Slytherin, but you were sorted there, even though you've got the heart of a Ravenclaw. Scorpius gave a faint smirk. Are you saying we count? The ghost's eyes fixed on them. Perhaps. The magic of the castle knows you better than you know yourselves. Rose shivered. And if we can release you? The ghost tilted its head. Then my torment ends, but beware. The mirror still lies below. It hungers for souls that seek greatness. Before they could ask more, a violent tremor shook the floor. Water rippled outward from the pedestal. From somewhere deeper in the chamber came a distant roar, low and ancient. What was that? Rose gasped. The Guardian, the ghost whispered, its voice fading. The mirror does not sleep unguarded. A crack of lightning flashed through the narrow window slits, and the chamber plunged into darkness. When the light returned, the ghost was gone. Only its whisper lingered in the cold air. Find the mirror before it finds you. The 3 stood frozen, hearts pounding. Then, from the darkness beyond the pillars, came the sound of footsteps. Soft, deliberate, echoing closer, and they were not their own. The footsteps echoed steadily, each one ringing against the flooded stones. Albus froze, wand raised, his pulse quickening. Rose drew closer, her breath shallow, the glowing leaf trembling in her hand. Scorpius stood perfectly still, eyes fixed on the far end of the chamber, where the shadows deepened into pure blackness. Then the steps stopped. For a moment, there was only silence, the heavy, waiting kind that made the heart ache. Lumos Maxima, Albus whispered, and his wand flared with white light, flooding the chamber. Nothing. Only the long, empty hall of pillars and the rippling water that reflected their trembling lights. The sound had vanished. But then a whisper came, faint as a thread. Turn back. Rose spun around, but there was no one there. The sound seemed to move with the air, impossible to pin down. Turn back while you still can. Who's there? Albus called. His voice bounced back at him, strange and hollow. When no answer came, Scorpius exhaled sharply and took a step forward. I think it came from behind those columns. Wait, Rose said, but he had already gone ahead, his reflection breaking apart on the surface of the water as he walked. Albus followed, wand lifted high, and Rose hurried after them. The sound of their steps seemed too loud now, too alive in the still air. They rounded the next pillar and froze. There was a statue there, a stone serpent coiled around a broken mirror frame. Its carved eyes gleamed wetly in the light, though its surface was cold and ancient. Scorpius ran his fingers across the serpent's head. This must have guarded the mirror once? Rose frowned. Then where's the mirror now? As if in answer, the ground trembled again, stronger this time. Dust fell from the ceiling. Somewhere deep below them, metal scraped against stone, slow and dreadful. Albus steadied himself against a pillar. That's coming from beneath us. The serpent statue's eyes flashed suddenly, 2 green sparks lighting within them. A deep, grinding noise filled the air, and the water on the floor began to swirl, spinning faster and faster around the pedestal. Move! Rose cried. They jumped back just as the center of the chamber split open, the floor parting to reveal a spiral stairway descending into darkness. Cold air rose from below, sharp with the scent of metal and old magic. Scorpius stared down into the shadows. "Well, I suppose that's an invitation." Rose gave him a look that might have frozen a basilisk. "You call that an invitation?" But Albus was already stepping forward. "If the mirror's down there, that's where we have to go. That ghost wanted us to find it. Or wanted us to die trying," Rose muttered, though she followed. The stairway wound steeply downward, slick and uneven. Their lights barely reached the walls. Strange carvings marked the stone. Snakes, eyes, words, in an ancient tongue that shifted when they tried to focus on them. After what felt like ages, the stairs ended in a narrow passage. The air here was colder still, and so quiet that even their breathing seemed too loud. "Finite Lumos," Scorpius whispered. "Listen." At first there was nothing. Then a faint scraping sound, rhythmic, like something being dragged. "It's coming from ahead," Albus said softly. "There's light. Look." Far down the corridor, a pale green glow pulsed gently as though from beneath water. They approached carefully, wands ready. The passage opened into a wide, circular hall. Its walls were lined with stone reliefs depicting the founders. Gryffindor's proud stance, Hufflepuff's calm smile, Ravenclaw's wise gaze, and Slytherin's sharp, cunning features. And there, at the center, stood the mirror. It was taller than any of them, its frame wrought in black metal shaped like coiling serpents. But the glass within was not clear. It shimmered like deep water, endless and alive. "The mirror of serpents," Scorpius murmured. "Merlin's beard. It's real." Rose stepped closer, transfixed. "It's beautiful." Albus reached out a hand, but Scorpius caught his arm. "Wait, didn't you hear what the ghost said? It lies. It traps people." "I just want to see," Albus said. "Just a glance." His fingers brushed the surface. The glass rippled, and then he saw it. Not his reflection, but a vision. Himself, standing triumphant in the great hall, the sorting hat in his hand, every student cheering, professors smiling, even his father looking proud in the crowd. A warmth filled his chest, powerful and intoxicating. He could be that person. He could finally step out from the shadow of the famous name he carried. "Albus," Rose said sharply, her voice echoing. "Step away." He blinked, pulling back. The vision faded, and suddenly he was only staring at his own pale reflection, his face drawn with longing and fear. Scorpius looked grim. "It's like the mirror of Ariste, but twisted. It shows what you most desire, and then it pulls you toward it." Rose knelt near the base. "There's writing here, old runes, look." She traced the inscription aloud. "Truth seen is truth bound. Desire claimed is soul undone." A rumble filled the hall, deep and guttural. And then came a voice. "You should not have come." The ghost had returned, but not as before. Its form was clearer now, its features sharper. It hovered beside the mirror, its eyes burning with green fire. "You woke the curse," it said, voice echoing like wind through a tomb. The Guardian rises. "What Guardian?" Scorpius demanded. The ghost turned its gaze toward the far wall. "The mirror feeds on those who seek it. It is never satisfied. You cannot control it, only flee." Even as it spoke, the glass in the mirror began to ripple again. The serpents carved into the frame moved, uncoiling. They slithered down to the floor, scales gleaming wetly, hissing in the dim light. "Run!" Rose cried. They turned, sprinting toward the corridor, as the ground cracked behind them. One of the serpents lunged, fangs snapping inches from Albus's leg. Scorpius shouted a spell, "Confringo," and fire erupted across the floor, forcing the creature back. The hall shook violently. The carvings on the walls crumbled. The glow from the mirror blazed brighter, filling the air with a roaring sound, like rushing water. They reached the stairs and scrambled upward, slipping on the wet stones. Behind them came a long, anguished wail, the ghost's final cry, before it faded into silence. At last they stumbled into the upper chamber again, gasping for air. The serpent statue was dark now, lifeless. The crack in the floor sealed itself with a heavy grinding noise. For a long time none of them spoke. The chamber was still once more. Scorpius broke the silence first, his voice low. "We found the mirror and nearly didn't make it back." Rose leaned against the wall, pale and shaking. That wasn't just any curse, it felt alive. It wanted us. Albus stared at the sealed floor, his heart still pounding. The ghost said it was bound here by betrayal. Maybe that's why it needed us, to finish what it couldn't. He turned toward his friends, eyes dark with resolve. But if that mirror is still down there, it's only a matter of time before someone else finds it. We have to destroy it. Outside thunder cracked again over the castle, shaking the very stones. And deep below, in the darkness of the sealed chamber, the mirror stirred, its surface rippling once more, as though something inside had awakened. Sleep was impossible that night. Even after the warmth of the Gryffindor common room returned to his bones, Albus lay awake, staring at the canopy of his bed, the flickering shadows of the fire dancing above. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the mirror's surface rippling, saw himself standing in that vision of triumph, the cheering crowd, the pride shining in his father's face. It had felt so real, so possible, but then came the serpent's hiss, the ghost's warning, and the image shattered like glass. Somewhere in the castle, a door slammed. Thunder rolled above the towers, and Albus turned over, pressing his face into the pillow. He wanted to forget that chamber, the ghost, the feeling of almost losing himself to that reflection. But Hogwarts never allowed its secrets to rest for long. By morning, news had already spread. Students gathered in hushed circles, whispering about strange tremors felt through the stone floors in the night, of lights flickering and portraits waking from their sleep to cry warnings. Peeves had been seen swooping through the corridors, shrieking, "It's awake, it's awake," before vanishing into the ceiling. During breakfast, Professor McGonagall stood at the high table, her face stern but drawn. "I remind all students that the dungeons are forbidden until further notice," she announced. "No one is to enter any area below the potions classroom. Prefects will assist in enforcing this rule. That is all." A murmur spread across the hall. Albus caught Scorpius's eye across the Gryffindor table. They both knew why. Rose leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "They must have found something. Or someone," Albus said quietly. Later that afternoon, as storm clouds gathered once more above the castle, the three met in an empty classroom on the 4th floor. Dust coated the desks and faint sunlight slanted through the tall windows, golden and quiet. Scorpius had brought the ancient map again, now folded and worn. "They can seal off the dungeons all they want," he said. "But that mirror, whatever it is part of the castle, and if it's still active, someone else will feel its pull." Rose frowned. "You heard McGonagall. If the professors are involved now, maybe we should let them handle it." Albus shook his head. They don't know what we saw. That ghost wasn't trying to harm us. It wanted to be freed. There's more to this, and if we don't understand it, the curse could spread. Rose hesitated, then sighed. I knew you'd say that. She looked at Scorpius. And you? You're really going along with this again? Scorpius smirked faintly. Of course. Someone has to keep the hero of Gryffindor from getting himself killed. Rose rolled her eyes, but there was fondness behind the gesture. Fine. But we're not going down there unprepared. We need information first. Something about Slytherin's relics. Maybe there's a clue about how to destroy the mirror. That was how, later that evening, they found themselves slipping through the shadows of the library, long after curfew. The aisles loomed tall around them, filled with the scent of parchment and dust. Madame Pince had retired to her quarters, and the only sound was the rustle of old pages and the distant rumble of thunder. Rose led them into the restricted section, whispering, Alohomora. The gate creaked open and they slipped inside. The shelves here were older, the books heavier, many bound in cracked leather and chained to their stands. Some whispered softly to themselves as the students passed. Scorpius moved along the rows, reading titles. The Founders' artifacts and their secrets, the early enchantments of Hogwarts, the cursed vaults. He paused, pulling one thick, green-bound volume free. This one mentions relics. They gathered around as he opened the book. The script was cramped and the illustrations faded, but one image stood out. 4 objects arranged around the outline of the castle: a sword, a diadem, a cup, and a mirror. There it is, Albus said softly. The Mirror of Serpents. Scorpius read aloud. Forged by Salazar Slytherin in the early days of the school, the mirror was said to reflect not merely appearance, but the truth of one's heart. Yet truth, untempered by wisdom, is poison. The mirror soon twisted those who gazed into it, binding their desires into its glass. Rose leaned closer. After the theft of the relic by a student seeking Slytherin's favor, the mirror was hidden deep within the dungeons and sealed by curse. The thief's spirit was condemned to guard it forever. The ghost, Albus whispered. That was him. Scorpius turned to the page. Listen to this. The only means to break the binding lies in reflection's reversal, the mirror must face itself. 2 mirrors, one true and one false, must be brought together to shatter the enchantment. Rose frowned. 2 mirrors? But there's only one. Not necessarily, Scorpius said. If the Mirror of Serpents shows lies, then maybe there's another that shows truth, a counterpart. The Mirror of Arist, Albus said slowly. It's still kept at Hogwarts, isn't it? Dumbledore moved it once, but maybe... Rose's eyes widened. If we bring them together, they could cancel each other out. Before Albus could reply, the lamps above them flickered. The air grew suddenly cold. From the far end of the aisle came the sound of pages turning, though no one was there. Someone's here, Scorpius whispered. They extinguished their wands, crouching behind a shelf. The cold deepened, sharp and biting. A faint mist drifted between the books. Then came the whisper again. You should not seek what was hidden. The voice was the same as before, but different now. Angrier. The ghost materialized between the shelves, pale and flickering, eyes burning like coals. The books rattled in their chains. Why have you returned? It demanded, its voice echoing across the stacks. You stir old wounds. that should remain closed. Albus stepped out from behind the shelf. You said you wanted to be freed? We think we know how. If we can find the other mirror. The ghost's expression twisted with something like pain. The other? Yes. But it was taken long ago, hidden where no shadow can touch it. You cannot find it. Rose raised her wand cautiously. Tell us where. The ghost hesitated. It lies where truth is tested, where reflection meets flame. Find it, and beware the lies that know your name. With that, the ghost flickered and vanished, leaving only the smell of smoke and old parchment. For a long moment they stood in silence. Scorpius finally exhaled. Well, that was cheerful. Albus frowned. Where reflection meets flame. What does that mean? Rose bit her lip, thinking. Reflection could mean water or a mirror again. Flame could mean weight. Her eyes lit up. The room of requirement. It changes into what you need most, right? Reflection and desire, like the mirrors themselves. And it's where Harry once found the mirror of Arist during the war. Albus nodded slowly. Then that's where we'll look. They slipped out of the library, hearts pounding. The corridors were dark, the portraits asleep, but the castle itself seemed to hum around them, alive with unseen energy. As they passed a window, lightning flashed outside, casting their shadows across the floor. For just a heartbeat, Albus thought he saw a fourth shadow, moving beside them, tall, thin, and shrouded. But when he turned, there was nothing there. By the time they reached the 7th floor, the storm had broken over the towers. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder booming overhead. They paced before the blank stretch of wall opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy, concentrating with all their will. We need a place to find the mirror of Arist, Albus whispered. Once, twice, 3 times. The door appeared, they exchanged a glance and stepped inside. The air shimmered with golden light. Tall mirrors lined the walls, reflecting their faces 100-fold, and at the far end of the room stood a single great mirror framed in gold, its surface clear and deep. The mirror of Arist, Rose breathed. They approached slowly. Albus felt the same pull he'd felt before, but gentler now, calmer. In the reflection, he saw his family smiling at him, proud and content. For the first time, he didn't feel the ache of envy or need, only peace. But then something flickered in the glass behind him, a dark shape forming, faint at first, then sharper, its hand reaching toward the surface. "Albus!" Scorpius shouted. He spun just as the shadow burst from the mirror, slamming into the room like a wave of black mist. The candles guttered out and the door behind them vanished, and from the depths of the mirror of Arist came a voice, cold and familiar. The mirrors are one again, and now you are mine. The golden light within the room of requirement vanished, swallowed whole by the black mist that poured from the mirror of Arist. Albus stumbled backward, his hand clutching at the air, his heart pounding so hard it seemed to shake the floor beneath him. The shadows twisted like living smoke, coiling around the mirrors that lined the walls, until every reflection was drowned in darkness. Rose raised her wand at once. Lumos Maxima! A brilliant light burst forth, scattering the nearest shadows, but the relief lasted only seconds. The darkness moved like a tide, swallowing the light, smothering it. It felt thick, heavy, and cold, and it carried with it the same voice that had haunted the dungeons. "You thought you could free me," it whispered. "But freedom is an illusion. You woke what was sleeping." Scorpius stepped forward, his wand steady, though his voice shook. "Show yourself. Who are you?" The mist swirled together, forming the outline of a tall, hooded figure. It was more than a ghost, less than human. Its edges flickered with threads of silver, its eyes two empty hollows burning faint green. "I was the guardian," the spirit said, its voice echoing like 100 whispers at once. "Once a student, once a fool. I sought greatness, and the mirror promised it to me. Now I am its servant, its prisoner." Albus found his voice. "Then help us destroy it. Help us end it before it takes anyone else." The spirit tilted its head. "Destroy it?" Its voice rose like wind through a crypt. "The mirror cannot be destroyed by mortal means. It must be reflected." Rose's eyes widened. "Reflected? Like the book said?" Scorpius turned toward the mirror of Erised, its golden frame now veined with black. "Then if we turn this one to face the mirror of serpents..." The spirit hissed, a sound like breaking glass. "To bring them together is to unbind the curse, but at a cost. Reflection consumes reflection. Two truths, two lies, both will shatter." "What kind of cost?" Albus demanded, the spirit's hollow gaze fixed on him. "A mirror needs a soul to see. One of you must become its reflection." The words hung in the air like frost. For a long time no one spoke. The shadows pressed closer, circling like wolves. Rose's hand trembled slightly on her wand. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Scorpius said quietly. "If we leave it, the curse spreads. The castle's already reacting. You saw the tremors, the lights. It's feeding off the students' desires." Albus looked from one friend to the other. His stomach twisted. He wanted to protest, to say that someone else, some teacher, some Auror could handle this. But deep down he knew the truth. This had begun with them. The ghost had chosen them. He nodded grimly. "Then we ended." The mirror before them shimmered, the darkness retreating for a moment to reveal their reflections. 3 figures standing side by side, faces pale but resolute. Behind their reflections, a 4th shadow lingered, silent and watching. The spirit extended one long spectral hand toward the mirror. "Take what you need. The mirror of truth will show you the path." Albus stepped closer. As his hand touched the cool glass, it rippled again. But instead of showing his own image, it revealed the dungeons, the chamber of echoes waiting below, the serpent statue guarding the sealed floor. A faint green glow pulsed within it, like a heartbeat. "That's where it's drawing its power," Rose said. "We need to bring the mirror of Erised down there." Scorpius blinked. "Move this thing? It must weigh a ton." Before he finished speaking, the mirror began to rise from the floor of its own accord, floating gently into the air. The spirit's voice echoed once more. "The castle remembers its purpose. It will guide you." The room of requirements walls shifted around them, reshaping into a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Convenient," Scorpius muttered, though his usual humor was gone. "Let's hope it's not leading us to our deaths." They followed the floating mirror down the spiraling stairs, their wands lighting the way. The descent seemed endless. The air grew thicker, colder, until their breaths misted before them. At last, they emerged into the chamber of echoes once again. The serpent statue's eyes gleamed in the dim light. The floor was whole now, but as the mirror of Erised drifted into the room, cracks appeared, forming a perfect circle at the center. Albus could feel the pull of the other mirror below, like a pulse under his skin. "It's right beneath us." The spirit appeared beside them once more. "Then you know what must be done." With a deafening rumble, the floor split open. revealing the mirror of serpents rising slowly into view. Its surface was dark as midnight, swirling with faint ghostly shapes. As it ascended, the water pooled around it began to boil. Rose shouted over the noise. "They're reacting to each other." "Now," Albus cried, "face them together." The two mirrors aligned, golden light against green shadow. The air between them shimmered violently, bending and distorting. Every reflection in the chamber flickered. Stone, water, their faces all breaking apart into shards of light and shadow. The spirit screamed, its voice tearing through the air. "The bond breaks. You must choose." The mirrors began to pull toward each other, the space between them collapsing. Albus felt the drag, like invisible hands trying to wrench his soul from his chest. He fell to his knees, gripping the floor. Rose cried out, clutching her head. "It's inside my mind. I can hear it." Scorpius's wand flew from his hand, shattering against the floor. "It's pulling me in, Albus!" Albus forced himself to his feet. The two mirrors were nearly touching now, their surfaces merging. He remembered the ghost's words. "One of you must become its reflection." He turned toward his friends, his decision already made. "Get back!" he shouted. "Now!" Rose's eyes widened in horror. "No! Don't you dare!" But before she could finish, Albus stepped forward, placing both hands on the surface of the mirror of serpents. The glass gave way beneath his touch, cool and deep as water. The moment his reflection vanished, the chamber exploded with light. The mirrors slammed together with a sound like thunder. Blinding radiance filled the hall, throwing Scorpius and Rose to the ground. The serpent statue shattered, the ceiling cracked, and the water turned to steam. Then, silence. When Rose opened her eyes, the mirrors were gone. Only broken glass lay across the floor, glittering faintly in the dying light. The ghost was gone too, its presence finally faded. "Albus," she whispered, her voice trembling. Scorpius sat up slowly, bruised and pale. "Where is he?" Rose looked around desperately. There was no trace of him, only the faint echo of his voice lingering in the air, carried on the last whisper of the fading curse. "Tell them. It's over." And then even that was gone. They stood in silence for a long time, the ruins of the chamber around them, the air still humming faintly with residual magic. The curse was broken, the mirrors destroyed, but Albus Potter was gone, vanished into the reflection he had chosen to face. As they turned to leave, Rose looked once more at the shattered glass scattered across the stone. For a moment she thought she saw a flicker of movement, a faint outline of Albus's face in one fragment, smiling, calm, and free. Then the shard caught the light and went still. Above them, Hogwarts was quiet once more. The storm had passed. But somewhere in the hidden places of the castle, where magic sleeps and dreams linger, a faint shimmer remained, like a reflection waiting for the dawn. The following morning, Hogwarts awoke to silence, a strange, uneasy quiet that seemed to hang in the very air. No tremors shook the floors, no whispers stirred in the corridors, no shadows moved behind the glass of windows or portraits. The storm that had raged for days was gone, leaving the grounds washed clean beneath a fragile winter light. And yet something in the castle's heart had changed. Rose Weasley felt it as she descended from the Gryffindor Tower with Scorpius beside her. The air was lighter somehow, as if the building itself had exhaled after a long, painful breath. Still, the halls felt emptier than before. Every step echoed too loudly, every familiar sight, the the staircase turning, the whispering portraits seemed touched by absence. They walked in silence until they reached the great hall. Students murmured softly among themselves, and the enchanted ceiling shone pale and clear. Professor sat at the high table, speaking in low voices, glancing often toward the staff doors leading down to the dungeons. Rose couldn't bring herself to sit. Instead, she and Scorpius slipped through a side corridor, heading toward the one place they both dreaded and needed to see. They passed the potions classroom, its door firmly locked, and continued deeper into the dungeon halls. The scent of damp stone filled the air. When they reached the narrow archway that once led to the Chamber of Echoes, they stopped. The iron door they had pried open before was gone. In its place was a smooth stretch of wall, freshly sealed by magic. "He really did it," Scorpius whispered. "He ended it." Rose ran her fingers across the wall, feeling only cold stone. "Yes," she said softly, "and he's gone because of it." A faint echo stirred in the distance, the trickle of water somewhere deep below, a sound both comforting and mournful. Rose stood there for a long time, her thoughts full of Albus, his quiet bravery, his stubbornness, the way he always stepped forward when others hesitated. She felt the weight of their victory and the price it had taken. Scorpius broke the silence first. "We have to tell McGonagall what happened. The mirror, the curse, all of it." Rose nodded. "She deserves to know, but not everything." He frowned. "Not everything? She doesn't need to know what he said before it happened," Rose murmured. "Some things belong to us alone." They left the dungeons, walking through the long, twisting corridors until they reached the stone gargoyle guarding the headmistress's office. When they gave the password "lemon sherbet," the statue leapt aside and the spiral staircase began to move. Professor McGonagall was waiting for them behind her desk, her expression grave but gentle. The fire in the hearth burned low, casting long shadows across the portraits that lined the walls. Several of them, former headmasters and headmistresses, watched silently as Rose and Scorpius entered. "I had a feeling you two might come," McGonagall said quietly. "Sit." They did. For a while the room was filled only with the soft crackle of the fire. Then Rose began to speak. She told her everything: the ghost, the Chamber of Echoes, the cursed mirror, the legend of the student who had betrayed Slytherin's trust. She described how the spirit had appeared to them, how the curse had awakened, and how the only way to end it was to bring the mirrors together. But when she came to the final part, the moment Albus had stepped into the mirror, her voice faltered. Scorpius took over, his tone low and steady, recounting the light, the explosion, the silence that followed. When they finished, McGonagall sat back in her chair, her face drawn with sorrow. "I suspected something was amiss in the old dungeons," she said at last. "I felt the wards tremble the night it happened, but I had no idea how deep the curse ran." She paused, looking between them. "You are both very lucky to be alive." Rose swallowed hard. "Professor, Albus saved us. He saved Hogwarts." McGonagall's eyes softened, though her lips trembled slightly before she spoke. "He was his father's son, in every way that mattered. I will see that his courage is remembered." She stood and turned to the portrait of Dumbledore above the mantel. The old headmaster gazed down, his blue eyes full of quiet understanding. "You knew of the Mirror of Arist?" McGonagall said. "Did you ever imagine this?" Dumbledore shook his head slowly. "I always feared that one day The mirror's reflection might find a shadow, but I am heartened to hear that it was broken, not by greed or power, but by sacrifice. Rose felt tears sting her eyes. "He isn't gone," she said suddenly. "I felt him. When the mirrors broke, I think he's still here, somewhere." McGonagall regarded her for a long moment. "Perhaps," she said softly.
Magic of that kind never disappears entirely. It changes, it lingers. When they left the office, the castle seemed quieter still, as if it too were listening. Over the next few days, life at Hogwarts slowly returned to normal. The dungeons were declared sealed indefinitely, and no one but the staff knew why. Rumors spread, as they always did, but none came close to the truth. Classes resumed, laughter returned to the common rooms, and the castle's ancient magic began to hum again, steadier, calmer. Yet every so often, when the torches flickered low or a reflection rippled faintly in a window pane, Rose would pause, her heart skipping a beat. It happened one night in the common room. The fire was burning low, and most of the students had gone to bed. Rose sat alone by the hearth, an open book resting forgotten in her lap. The flames crackled softly, their light dancing across the glass of a nearby window. Something stirred within it, a shimmer like the faint outline of a face. For an instant she saw him, Albus, smiling faintly, his green eyes calm. "Rose," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper, "it's all right." Her breath caught. She blinked, and he was gone. But where his image had been, the glass glowed faintly, etched with a single word that faded almost as soon as it appeared. "Thank you." Rose pressed her hand against the glass, smiling through her tears. "Goodbye, Albus," she whispered. After that night, the reflection never came again. But every time a storm rolled over the castle, she felt a strange comfort, as though the thunder itself carried his laughter through the halls. Years would pass before the truth of the Chamber of Echoes became only a rumor told by students on dark evenings, a tale of the most terrifying ghost of Hogwarts. They would speak of the haunting in the dungeons, of mirrors that moved and whispered, of a ghostly guardian freed by 3 brave friends. But only 2 of those friends would ever know the truth, that the ghost curse had ended, not through terror, but through courage, and somewhere, deep within the castle's endless enchantments, where walls remembered every triumph and every sorrow, a single reflection waited, forever young, forever brave, watching over the school he had saved. The storm passed, and dawn came bright and clear over the towers of Hogwarts. The lake gleamed like glass, the sky stretched wide and open, and in the stillness of that morning, the castle seemed to whisper its gratitude to the boy who had become part of its story. The tale of Albus Potter, the boy who faced the mirror and set its ghosts free, was not written in any book nor carved upon any stone, yet it lived quietly in every corridor, every candle, every reflection that caught the light just so. For Hogwarts never forgets. Spring came to Hogwarts with a gentleness that felt like a sigh after long sorrow. The snow melted from the castle's eaves, dripping softly into the lake below, and the first crocuses pushed through the thawing earth. Yet even as laughter and sunlight returned to the courtyards, not everything felt as it once had. Rose and Scorpius carried the memory of that night like a shadow they dared not speak of too often. The world above had righted itself, but in quiet moments, when the wind whispered along the stone corridors, they could still feel it, the echo of something vast and ancient beneath their feet. Hogwarts had secrets again,
The chamber of echoes, now sealed by magic deeper than any spell of man, lay silent below the castle. Professors occasionally murmured that they felt a presence there, a calm one, watching, as though the foundations themselves had gained a guardian unseen. And sometimes, on nights when the moon rose over the black lake, the waters shimmered faintly with green light, only to fade before morning. Rose, though she never said so aloud, always believed it was Albus. The months slipped by. Lessons resumed their rhythm. Quidditch matches filled the air with cheers, and new rumors replaced the old. The story of the haunting in the dungeons had already turned into legend, exaggerated by younger students until it bore little resemblance to truth. They said the ghost had been a serpent made of fire, or that Peeves had banished it with a bucket of holy water. Some whispered that the curse had been an enchantment of Voldemort's own making, buried in the castle for decades. Rose would only smile when she heard these tales. Scorpius, on the other hand, often smirked and added details of his own. "Ah, but you forgot," he would tell the wide-eyed first years. It was also allergic to homework. It was easier that way, to laugh, to live, to let the truth rest quietly between them. But one April afternoon, something happened that stirred the old fear once more. Rose had gone alone to the library, as she often did. The air smelled of dust and parchment, and sunlight pooled across the long wooden tables. She'd been working on an essay about magical architecture when she heard it. A faint hum, like a faraway song, coming from the restricted section. She froze, quill poised above the parchment. It wasn't loud, barely more than a vibration, but it was unmistakable, a low pulsing rhythm like breath moving through stone. "Not again," she whispered under her breath. And yet curiosity tugged stronger than fear. She rose, moving softly between the shelves, until she reached the chained gates of the restricted section. Beyond the bars, the air shimmered faintly as though touched by heat. Then she saw it, a mirror. Not large like the cursed ones before, but small, hand-sized, resting on the corner of a forgotten shelf. It was framed in bronze, its surface dull with dust. She stared at it for a long moment, her pulse quickening. She didn't dare touch it, not at first. But after a while she drew her wand and murmured, "Finite incantatum." Nothing happened. The hum deepened, soft but insistent, and for a heartbeat she thought she heard a voice within it, a whisper too faint to catch. Her chest tightened. Slowly she reached forward. Her fingertips brushed the mirror's surface. A rush of warmth spread through her arm. Light flared across the bronze frame, and the hum resolved into a word. "Rose." She stumbled back, nearly knocking into a shelf. The mirror's glow faded, leaving behind a reflection of her own pale face and wide eyes. But then, there it was again, softer this time. "Don't be afraid." The voice was gentle, familiar, full of calm courage. "Albus," she whispered. The surface rippled, and for an instant she saw him, faint like a reflection seen through water. His outline was hazy, but his smile was clear. "It's all right," he said. "I told you, magic doesn't end, it changes." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "Where are you?" "In the in-between," he said, his voice echoing as though from far away. "The mirrors are gone, but the magic remains. I'm part of it now. The castle remembers." Rose reached out a trembling hand toward the glass. "Can you come back?" He shook his head slowly. "No, but I can still protect it. The darkness that once bound me is gone. The reflection holds peace now." She swallowed hard, her heart aching. You shouldn't have done it alone. He smiled faintly. Neither did I. You and Scorpius were there. That's what made it work. The light around the mirror began to fade, the image dimming, like embers dying in the hearth. Wait, she said quickly. There's so much I want to tell you. His voice grew faint, like wind through an open window. Then tell the story, Rose. Make it more than a secret. And with that, the mirror went dark. When she blinked, her reflection stared back, only hers, pale and tearful. The bronze frame was cool beneath her fingers. She stood there for a long while, the quiet of the library closing around her like a shroud. At last she took the mirror, wrapped it in her cloak, and carried it to Professor McGonagall's office. The headmistress listened in silence as Rose told her everything, every word, every shimmer of light, every echo of that beloved voice. When she finished, McGonagall looked grave but not surprised. There have always been bonds between the castle and those who love it deeply, she said. Perhaps Albus found his own. What should I do with it? Rose asked softly. Keep it safe, McGonagall replied, not as a weapon but as remembrance. Some magic belongs not in vaults or libraries, but in hearts. And so Rose did. She kept the mirror, though it never spoke again. She placed it on her bedside table in Gryffindor Tower, where it caught the morning light each day and turned it to gold. Years later, when she and Scorpius had long graduated, they would sometimes return to Hogwarts for the holidays. The castle always welcomed them, its torches flaring warmly as if recognizing old friends. And whenever Rose passed through the corridors at night, she would glance toward the windows and think she saw a familiar shadow walking beside her, watching, guarding. The ghost of Hogwarts was no longer a thing of fear. It had become something gentler, a guardian spirit whispered of by new generations of students. They said that if you looked into a window at midnight, you might see a young wizard's face smiling faintly back, his eyes bright with courage, and though they never knew his name, the castle did. For Hogwarts remembers all who loved it, and those who gave themselves to its keeping are never truly lost. They live in the whispers of the walls, in the gleam of the stone, in the reflection of every mirror that catches the dawn. And sometimes, on still mornings, when the lake lies smooth as glass, a single ripple spreads across its surface, like a hand brushing gently through the water, before the sun warms it away. It is said that on such mornings, the echo of Albus Potter's laughter can be heard beneath the towers, bright and soft as bird song, and the castle smiles. Years drifted by like the turning pages of a great, enchanted tome. The world beyond Hogwarts grew and changed. Wars forgotten, heroes remembered, and children of the old names arriving once more at the castle's gates. Yet within those stone walls, time moved differently. Magic aged, yes, but it did not fade. It gathered like mist, deep and knowing, in the very breath of the place. It was on one such misty morning, long after Rose Weasley and Scorpius Malfoy had left the school, that a new student stood on the banks of the Black Lake. Her name was Elara Finch, a second-year Ravenclaw, with curious gray eyes and an imagination far too wild for her own good. She loved stories, especially the ones that began with, "No one truly knows." And of all Hogwarts whispered legends, none fascinated her more than the tale of the most terrifying ghost of Hogwarts. According to the older students, the ghost had once haunted the dungeons, chained to a cursed mirror, whispering in the voices of the dead. Others said it was the spirit of a boy who had vanished saving the castle, and that he still appeared in reflections when danger was near. Alara believed the latter. "Don't be ridiculous," said her friend Milo Woodcroft one afternoon as they sat by the lake, parchment and quills forgotten in their laps. "It's just a story meant to keep us from sneaking into the dungeons." Alara smirked. "Then why did the professors seal that corridor under the potions classroom with magic that still hums if you go near it?" "Because students like you can't mind their own business," Milo replied, throwing a pebble into the water. But Alara's curiosity was stronger than reason. That night, long after curfew, she crept from her dormitory with a lantern in hand, her heart pounding with the thrill of discovery. She moved through the silent corridors, following a pull she could neither explain nor resist. A whisper that seemed to come from the walls themselves. When she reached the old dungeons, the torches flickered to life on their own, one by one, casting long, rippling shadows. The air was cool and still. The stones beneath her feet gleamed faintly as though polished by centuries of passing spirits. At the far end of the corridor she saw it, the sealed wall. It looked like any other stretch of stone. But as she stepped closer, she felt it hum, deep and low, like the note of an unseen harp string. Alara touched the wall. The stone was warm. A faint green light glimmered beneath the surface, tracing the shape of what might once have been a door. The air grew thick, charged with a power both beautiful and strange. And then, from somewhere deep within the wall, came a whisper, soft, clear, and kind. "You shouldn't be here," Alara gasped, stepping back. "Who's there?" The voice did not answer immediately. When it spoke again, it carried a hint of laughter, warm, almost human. "Curiosity runs deep in this castle. It always finds the same path." She swallowed. Are you the ghost?" A pause, then, "That's one name they've given me." Her lantern flame quivered. "Are you dangerous?" "Not anymore," said the voice, and for a moment she thought she saw a shimmer in the stone. The faint outline of a young man's face, kind-eyed and smiling. "Tell me, child, what brings you to a place the castle itself wishes forgotten?" Alara hesitated. "I wanted to know if the stories were true." "They are," said the voice gently, "and they're not. Stories change. They grow, like the people who tell them." She frowned. "Then tell me your story, the real one." The wall seemed to breathe, the glow within it deepening. "Long ago there was a curse that nearly consumed this place. It fed on desire, on pride, on fear. But it was broken by courage, by friendship. One gave himself to save the rest. The castle remembered, and in remembering made him part of itself." Alara felt her heart tighten. "You mean you?" A quiet laugh. "Names matter little now. I am what remains of what was saved. When the castle trembles, I hold it steady. When shadows gather, I keep the light." For a moment, silence filled the hall. Then the voice spoke once more, softer than before. "You should return to your dormitory. The hour grows late." Alara nodded slowly. "Will I see you again?" The shimmer flickered once, faintly wistful. "Perhaps, when you truly need me." The glow faded, and the wall returned to stillness. The hum was gone. Alara stood there for a long moment, her lantern trembling slightly in her hand. Then she turned and hurried back up the stairs, her mind alive with wonder. The next day she tried to tell Milo what had happened. He laughed at first, but when he saw her expression, the awe in her eyes, the quiet certainty, His own laughter faltered. "You really think you talked to him?" "I don't think," she said. "I know." That night she returned again, and again after that. The voice never frightened her. Sometimes it spoke, sometimes it didn't. But always she felt its presence, calm and watchful. She began to bring parchment and ink, writing down what she learned, bits of history, half-forgotten spells, tales of the founders themselves. It was as though the castle, through him, was teaching her. Months passed. One evening near the end of term, she went to the dungeons one last time before leaving for the summer. The wall glowed as before, and the voice greeted her softly. "You've learned much, Alara Finch," she smiled. "You taught me?" "No," said the voice. "You listened. That is rarer than magic." She hesitated. "Will you always be here?" A long pause filled with the quiet pulse of the castle's heart. "I will," the voice said, "so long as Hogwarts stands, so long as its stones remember." Alara pressed her hand to the wall. The warmth met her touch, steady and strong. "Then I'll come back," she whispered, and when she withdrew her hand, the faint outline of words shimmered where her palm had been. A message that would linger long after she left. The castle keeps its promises. That summer, when Alara told her family the story of the ghost who wasn't frightening but kind, her mother laughed and said it was a dream. Yet when she returned to Hogwarts the following autumn, she noticed something new. In one of the high towers, a small mirror had been hung near the window, catching the morning light. On its surface, faint and fleeting, she thought she saw a boy's reflection smiling at her before fading into sunlight. And though she never spoke of it aloud, Alara knew she had met the truth behind the legend. For not all ghosts haunt out of sorrow. Some remain to guard what they loved most, and to remind those who follow that courage, once kindled, never truly dies. Thus, the ghost of Hogwarts lived on, not in fear or warning, but in light and laughter. The reflection of a boy who had once faced the darkness and, in doing so, became part of the magic itself. Autumn descended upon Hogwarts once more, with its golden leaves swirling through the courtyard and the scent of wood smoke rising from the chimneys. The lake mirrored the skies of burnished copper, and the castle seemed to hum with quiet contentment. Yet beneath that peace, unseen by most, an older magic stirred, watchful, patient, remembering. Alara Finch was now in her 3rd year, and though she'd grown taller and wiser, the spark of curiosity that had led her to the dungeons had not dimmed. She still visited the sealed corridor sometimes, though she never dared touch the wall again. It no longer glowed for her, but she could feel the warmth of it, a silent acknowledgement, as if the spirit within knew she was near. The stories about the ghost who guards Hogwarts had spread widely by now. Even Professor Binns, who seldom noticed anything beyond his lecture notes, mentioned it during one of his endless classes on castle lore. "A curious case," he droned, floating before his desk. "A benevolent apparition, they say. Unlike most. Some claim it has been seen in the Great Hall's silver plates during storms. Nonsense, of course, but an intriguing myth." Alara had exchanged a secret smile with Milo across the room. To her, it was no myth. That evening, the castle was alive with celebration. The first Quidditch victory of the year had gone to Ravenclaw, and laughter echoed through the corridors. Students crowded around the fire in the common rooms, trading stories and sweets. Alara joined them for a while, but her thoughts wandered. The laughter felt hollow compared to the strange, quiet magic she had once touched. Near midnight, when the castle had begun to doze, she slipped away. The moon was high, and silver light streamed through the windows, spilling across the floors in long ribbons. She wandered through the corridors in her slippers, her breath fogging in the cool air. As she passed the old tapestry of the sleeping basilisk, she felt it again, the faint hum of the stones, a heartbeat deep within the wall. "Hello," she whispered. The air shimmered faintly, and the voice she had not heard in months spoke again, calm and gentle. "You shouldn't be awake, Alara Finch." She smiled, her pulse quickening with joy. "I couldn't sleep. The castle feels alive tonight." "It always is," said the voice. "It breathes with those who dwell within it. But tonight it remembers." "Remembers what?" There was a pause, then, "The night it was saved." Ilara stepped closer. "Tell me," she whispered. And so he did. The voice wove the memory as though it had happened only yesterday. The breaking of the mirrors, the blinding light, the moment when darkness had fallen silent. He spoke of the friends who had stood beside him, of courage that burned brighter than any curse, of sacrifice freely given. As he spoke, faint lights flickered within the stone like distant stars seen through fog. Alara could almost see it all, the chamber of echoes, the serpent statue shattered, and the figure of a young wizard standing tall against the rising dark. When he finished, she stood in silence for a long moment, her eyes shining. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "You saved everything." The voice was quiet. "No one saves anything alone. Hogwarts endures because of those who love it." The wall dimmed again, but this time another voice, faint and distant, seemed to echo from within it, light as laughter. "Who's that?" Alara asked, startled. The ghost's tone softened. "The castle holds many memories. Sometimes the echoes overlap." "You mean the others are still there?" "Not as you would understand," said the voice. "But their warmth remains. A place like this never forgets those who gave themselves for it." Alara smiled faintly. "Then I'm glad. I'd hate for you to be lonely." There was a silence, and for a moment, she thought she heard him chuckle. "Lonely? No, child. The castle is never empty. Even when you cannot see us, we are here, in the whisper of the staircases, the flicker of candlelight, the ripples on the lake. Every laugh, every spell, every act of kindness strengthens us." The warmth of those words stayed with her as she returned to her dormitory. She fell asleep that night with a smile, dreaming of a castle lit from within by unseen stars. But peace never lasted forever at Hogwarts. It began subtly, as all changes do. A flickering of torches, a strange silence in the great hall, the sense that the castle was holding its breath. Professors grew watchful, exchanging glances during meals. Portraits whispered among themselves when students passed. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows, Alara felt the hum beneath the stones again. But this time, it was not calm. It trembled. She ran to the dungeons, her footsteps echoing through the corridors. The wall where she had once spoken to the ghost glowed faintly, not green but crimson, as though the heart of the castle itself had caught fire. "Something's wrong," she whispered. "What's happening?" The voice came weaker than before, distorted by a strange static. "The castle, it shifts. Something old stirs beneath the foundations. Can I help?" "No." The word was firm but kind. "You must tell the headmistress. The wards are weakening. A fragment of the mirror may have survived." Alara's breath caught. "But the mirrors were destroyed." "Not all magic ends cleanly," said the voice. "Shards can carry the curse. if someone has found one. The wall shuddered. Dust fell from the ceiling. Go. She ran. By the time she reached McGonagall's office, thunder was shaking the towers. The headmistress stood at the window, her wand raised, muttering incantations that shimmered in the air like golden threads. "Professor," Alara cried, "it's the mirrors, the curse, it's coming back." McGonagall turned sharply, her eyes narrowing. "Who told you that?" Alara hesitated. "The ghost." For a long heartbeat, McGonagall said nothing. Then she nodded once gravely. "Then we must trust him again." Together they hurried down through the corridors, the lights flickering wildly overhead. The tremors grew stronger. In the depths below, a deep, resonant sound filled the air, like the tolling of a great bell underwater. When they reached the sealed wall, it was blazing with light. McGonagall raised her wand, speaking an ancient word. The glow steadied, but only barely. "Where's it coming from?" she demanded. Alara pressed her hand to the stones. A sudden vision flooded her mind, a flash of the lake, the reflection of the moon fractured into 1,000 shards. One of them gleamed with an unnatural green. "The lake," she gasped. "It's in the lake." McGonagall's face paled. "Merlin's mercy." Without another word, she seized Alara's hand, and they ran toward the grounds. Rain drenched them as they raced across the grass, the storm raging overhead. The lake was boiling, its surface breaking with strange, luminous ripples, and there, at the center of the turmoil, something glimmered. A shard of glass floating upright on the water, shining like an emerald flame. As they approached, the voice whispered again, clearer this time. "Be careful, Alara. The mirror remembers hunger." She looked toward the castle, its towers dark against the storm, and whispered back, "Then we'll remind it who it's dealing with." The shard pulsed once, then sank beneath the surface. The rain fell harder, the lake went still, and from somewhere deep below, something ancient began to awaken. The storm did not pass, it deepened. Lightning split the sky above Hogwarts, white and fierce, casting the towers into stark relief. Rain lashed the windows of the castle like 1,000 ghostly hands, and the lake below heaved with waves that glowed faintly green, as though something deep beneath the water was stirring to life. Professor McGonagall stood at the edge of the shore, her cloak whipping around her in the wind. Alara clutched her wand beside her, rain streaming down her face. The water had gone black again, but the faint hum that filled the air told her the danger had not passed. "It's a shard of the mirror," she shouted over the thunder. "It has to be. The curse is coming back." McGonagall nodded grimly. The Mirror of Serpents was never merely an object. It was an enchantment made of desire, and desire can never be destroyed, only contained. Someone or something must have disturbed its remnants. A flash of lightning revealed the lake's surface rippling outward in perfect circles, as if from a single heartbeat below. Alara could feel it pulsing in her bones. "What do we do?" she asked, voice trembling. McGonagall raised her wand high. "We contain it. Hold your wand steady, on my count. 1, 2. But before the third word left her lips, the water erupted. A column of green light burst upward, throwing both witch and student backward onto the wet ground. Out of the column rose a figure, shimmering, formless at first, then solidifying into a tall shape cloaked in shadow. Its surface flickered like broken glass, every movement leaving a trail of reflections behind it. Alara gasped. "It's the mirror. What's left of it?" The thing turned toward her, its face smooth and featureless save for the faint outline of eyes that glowed faint emerald. When it spoke, Its voice was like many voices at once, echoes of all who had ever looked into it. I am desire unfulfilled. McGonagall stepped forward, her wand alight. You are nothing but a fragment, a remnant of corruption. You have no power here. The reflection tilted its head. Power never dies, headmistress. It waits. A wave of force rippled outward, flattening the reeds along the shore. Ilara raised her wand, shouting a shield charm, and the blast split around her in twin spirals of rain. Professor, she cried, it's feeding on the lake. It's using the water as a mirror. McGonagall's eyes widened. Then we must break its reflection. She pointed her wand skyward. Ignis Caeli! Flames burst from her wand and shot upward into the storm. They hung for a moment in midair before curving downward in a ring of golden fire that surrounded the lake, its light searing through the darkness. Steam hissed up where the rain struck it, and the water began to churn violently. The reflection screamed, 1,000 voices in agony. The lake boiled, and the green light flickered, fading, but not enough. Ilara could feel the pull in her chest again, the same lure she had read about in the story of Albus Potter, the mirror's temptation, the whisper of every unspoken wish. You want to see, it murmured to her, its voice weaving through the wind. You want to know, look into me, and you will find every answer you've ever sought. Her hands shook. For an instant she saw herself reflected in the rain, older, wiser, powerful beyond imagining, a version of herself unafraid. Then she remembered another voice, calmer, kinder. Curiosity runs deep in this castle. It always finds the same path. Ilara set her jaw. Not this time. She gripped her wand in both hands and thrust it toward the lake. Finite maledictum. The air crackled with power. Her spell struck the surface of the water and spread like a spider's web of silver light. The reflection howled again, its form fracturing into 1,000 shards of green glass that spiraled upward and vanished into the storm. When it was over, silence fell, so complete that even the rain seemed to pause. The flames around the lake guttered out, leaving only the faint hiss of steam. McGonagall lowered her wand slowly, her expression weary but proud. You did well, Miss Finch. Ilara's knees nearly gave out with relief. Is it gone? The headmistress glanced toward the water. The lake was calm once more, its surface dark and still. For now. But ancient magic never disappears entirely. It slumbers. Ilara stared at the reflection of the clouds rippling across the lake. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw a face there. Not the hollow mask of the mirror's ghost, but a young man's, warm and familiar. He smiled faintly, then vanished as the ripples spread. Professor, Ilara said quietly. That wasn't the mirror, was it? That was him. McGonagall followed her gaze. Perhaps the castle remembers those who protect it. The two stood there in silence for a time, the storm finally easing above them. The first hint of dawn colored the clouds pink and silver. When they returned to the castle, the portraits along the corridors seemed brighter somehow. Even the ghosts moved differently, less restless, more aware. Nearly headless, Nick gave Ilara a solemn nod as she passed, and the gray lady paused mid-glide to say softly, "He watches still." That night, the entire castle felt alive again. The torches burned steady and the staircases turned smoothly. No one spoke of the storm the next day. Only McGonagall and Ilara knew how close Hogwarts had come to another curse. But the lake kept its secret. Weeks later, when the air had turned warm and gentle once more, Ilara returned to the shore alone.
The water shimmered in the sunlight, undisturbed. She knelt and touched its surface, watching her reflection ripple outward. "Thank you," she whispered, and just as her hand broke the surface, a voice, quiet like a breath, rose from the depths. "And thank you, Alara Finch." Tears stung her eyes. "You're still here." "Always," said the voice. "The castle needs hearts like yours." The reflection faded, leaving only the still lake and the distant cry of a bird. Alara smiled through her tears. The old fear was gone now. The curse was no longer a wound but a memory, a story the school would keep safe. And in that moment, with sunlight breaking through the last clouds, she understood what Hogwarts truly was. Not just a castle, not merely a school, but a living thing woven of every act of bravery, every whisper of love, every sacrifice given to protect it. As she rose to leave, the wind stirred the grass, and she heard faint laughter echoing across the lake, warm and familiar, carrying through the morning mist. The ghost of Hogwarts was watching, as he always had, his reflection now one with the light. The boy who had faced the mirror had become the castle's heart, and through him, its magic would never die. The summer that followed was the most peaceful Hogwarts had known in years. The towers gleamed in the sunlight, ivy draping their sides like green silk. The lake sparkled under a cloudless sky, so calm that even the giant squid basked lazily in its warmth. For most, the storm and its strange lights had already faded into rumor. Only a handful remembered what had truly happened beneath the water that night. Alara Finch was among them. She carried that memory with quiet pride. Though she never spoke of it beyond the headmistress's office, she knew she had helped preserve something ancient, something that had existed long before her and would endure long after. She often found herself drawn to the lake's edge after lessons, where the air smelled of grass and old magic. Sometimes she felt a hum beneath her feet, faint and steady like a heartbeat sleeping beneath the ground. On one such afternoon, as the sun sank behind the forbidden forest and painted the sky in gold, she heard footsteps behind her. "Still visiting your ghost, are you?" Alara turned, smiling. It was Milo, older now, but as irreverent as ever. He dropped down beside her on the grass, tossing a stone into the water. "You've been coming here every evening since term started. If you're trying to summon him, I think he's ignoring you." She laughed softly. "He's not a pet, you know. He's something else. A guardian, maybe." Milo rolled his eyes. "You really believe that story? The one about a student saving Hogwarts centuries ago? Come on, Alara. Even Binns thinks that's an exaggeration." Alara looked out over the water, the reflection of the sun shimmering across her face. "You haven't heard him," she said quietly. "If you had, you wouldn't call it an exaggeration." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Milo sighed. "You know, sometimes I think this castle chooses people. People who see what others can't." She smiled faintly. "It does." They sat together until the shadows grew long, talking of lessons and Quidditch and the ordinary things of school life. Yet as the last light faded, Alara noticed something, small ripples spreading outward from the center of the lake, though no wind stirred the surface. She stood, her heart quickening. "Do you see that?" Milo frowned. "It's probably just the squid." But Alara shook her head. The water was glowing again, not green this time, but silver, soft and steady, like moonlight beneath the waves. She stepped closer, her shoes sinking slightly into the damp earth. The glow rose higher, gathering into a faint mist that hovered above the water. Within it, a shape began to form, tall and indistinct, but human. Milo scrambled to his feet. "Bloody hell!" "Wait," Alara whispered. "Don't move." The mist brightened. The shape solidified just for an instant, and a voice drifted across the lake, clear, calm, and achingly familiar. "Do not fear, the castle is safe." Alara's breath caught in her throat. "Albus!" The figure's outline flickered like a candle flame. The mirror's echo is gone. The shards have sunk deep, bound by the lake's memory, but the castle stirs. New magic rises. "Promise me you'll guard it, as I once did." "I will," she whispered. "I promise." Milo, wide-eyed and pale, could only stare as the figure smiled, fading into the rippling light. The lake settled once more into stillness. Ilara stood there a long time, her reflection mingling with the fading glow. Then she turned to Milo, who was still speechless. "So," she said softly, "do you believe me now?" He swallowed hard. I might." She laughed quietly, and together they made their way back to the castle, its windows gleaming with warm, golden light. The school year turned gently toward autumn again. The forbidden forest deepened to crimson and bronze, and owls wheeled across the evening sky. Yet in the peace of those days, another mystery began to unfold. It started with whispers among the portraits, old ones whose paint had begun to fade. They claimed to hear footsteps in the halls at night, light and quick, as though a student hurried past, though none were there. A few even said they'd seen a shadow in the torchlight, the outline of a boy, tall and graceful, moving toward the dungeons before vanishing. Rose Weasley's portrait, hung in the Hall of Honor among great witches and wizards, was the first to recognize him. She spoke softly to McGonagall's successor, the new headmistress. "I know that walk," she said with a wistful smile. "He's still watching." News of the sightings spread, and soon the younger students began to tell new tales of Hogwarts' kind ghost, the protector of the dungeons, the light in the lake, the spirit who whispered in the castle's dreams. Ilara didn't correct them. Some truths she'd learned belonged to stories. One night, near the end of term, she returned once more to the dungeons. She had not been there since the storm. The corridor was quiet, the torches flickering softly. The wall where she had once spoken to him stood dark and still. "Hello?" she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's me again." No answer came, only the faint drip of water somewhere in the distance. She smiled faintly. "I know you're still here. The castle feels different when you're near." As she turned to leave, a soft light bloomed in the stone, warm and gold. Words shimmered faintly across the surface, carved in lines of light that pulsed once, then steadied. "Where courage stands, I stand also." Her eyes filled with tears. "Goodbye," she whispered, "and thank you." The light faded, leaving the wall unchanged. Yet she could still feel it, the warmth, the heartbeat of magic beneath her hand. Years later, when Ilara Finch was no longer a student, but a professor of charms, she told her own pupils stories of the castle and its unseen guardian. She told them of courage, of sacrifice, of how even shattered things could hold great beauty. And sometimes, during quiet evenings, she would walk by the lake and see her reflection ripple beside another's, faint, smiling, timeless. The legend grew with the years. The ghost was no longer feared, but revered, the embodiment of Hogwarts' living heart. Children whispered that if ever true darkness returned, the ghost would rise again from the lake, bringing with him the light of every brave soul who had ever walked the castle's halls. And so he remained, not a haunting, but a promise
a reflection in still water, a whisper in candlelight, the quiet laughter in thunder after a storm. Hogwarts stood eternal, its towers gleaming through every age, and within its walls the spirit of its guardian lingered, unseen but never forgotten. For as long as courage endured, the boy who had faced the mirror would never fade. Long years passed, and Hogwarts endured, as it always had, proud and eternal beneath the Scottish skies. The castle's stones had absorbed centuries of laughter, sorrow, and song, and now their magic seemed older and wiser than ever before. Seasons changed and changed again, yet the enchantment of the place never dulled. It waited, patient and watchful, like a living heart. Professor Alara Finch grew into her place among that living legend. To her students, she was both stern and kind, a teacher of grace, never wasting a word, and one who seemed to know when mischief was brewing before anyone else did. The younger pupils whispered that she had been chosen by the castle, for torches always seemed to burn brighter when she passed. She never corrected them. In truth, she could feel the castle's pulse in her bones, a faint hum beneath her feet when she walked the corridors. The old dungeons no longer frightened anyone. They had become quiet places of study, lined with soft light and new enchantments. And yet sometimes when she passed near the sealed wall, she would pause, her hand resting briefly against the stone. It was still warm. Then came a winter unlike any before. Snow fell so thickly that the grounds vanished beneath a white silence. The black lake froze over in a single night, gleaming beneath the moon like a sheet of dark glass. The students rejoiced, skating and laughing, their voices carrying across the frosted air. But Alara felt a heaviness stirring, the kind that settled over the castle before great change. Strange things began to happen. Mirrors in the corridors fogged for no reason. Candles burned blue instead of gold. The portraits of past headmasters whispered anxiously to one another, their painted eyes flicking toward the windows. One evening, as the wind howled through the towers, Alara sat by her fire-grating essays. When her candle light flickered and dimmed, the warmth in the room dropped to a chill. Then she heard it, the faintest whisper, threading through the crackle of the hearth. Alara. She froze. The voice was familiar, but older now, deeper. It carried weariness, and yet the same calm that had comforted her years ago. Albus, she whispered, standing slowly. The mirror above her mantle had begun to glow, its surface rippling like water. The wards are stirring, the voice said. Something seeks what was broken. Her breath caught. You mean the mirror? No, came the reply. Something older than that, something beneath even the foundations. The castle trembles again. Alara stared into the mirror's depths. What do I do? The reflection flickered, revealing the faint outline of his face, pale and distant, as though speaking from another world. Listen to the stones. They will show you. And then the glow vanished. Alara didn't sleep that night. Instead, she took her cloak and walked the silent halls. The castle was restless. The portraits whispered in their sleep, and the staircases shuddered slightly underfoot. When she reached the entrance hall, she noticed frost creeping up the walls, spreading from the direction of the dungeons. Her pulse quickened. She followed. The corridors below were colder than ice. The familiar hum that once comforted her now trembled with unease. When she reached the sealed wall, it was no longer smooth and still. Cracks of silver light veined its surface, pulsing faintly. Albus, she murmured, what's happening? No voice answered. Instead, the walls shuddered, and from within came a low, echoing note, like a bell struck deep beneath the earth. The magic in the air thickened until it burned against her skin. She raised her wand instinctively. "Finite maledictum," she cried. The cracks flared white, then dimmed. The sound faded to silence. She waited, heart hammering, before slowly lowering her wand. Whatever had been stirring was quiet again. For now. But she knew the reprieve would not last. The following morning she stood before the headmistress, a stern witch named Claribel Marchbanks, sharp-eyed and cautious. Alara told her everything, the frost, the light, the voice from the mirror. Professor Marchbanks frowned deeply. "The wards are ancient, Finch. Some predate the founders themselves. If something beneath the school is waking, we must know what." "I think it's connected to the old chamber," Alara said quietly. "The one Slytherin sealed. The mirror of serpents was only one part of that curse." Marchbanks studied her for a long moment. "You've always had the castle's favor, Finch. If it still speaks to you, follow its call. But take care. Even love can wound, if it's born of magic that's too old." Alara nodded. That evening she returned once more to the dungeons. Snow still swirled against the windows, casting pale light along the walls. The sealed stone glowed faintly, waiting. "I'm here," she whispered. The voice came again, soft but strained. "The frost carries echoes. They reach from below. Remnants of the curse, awakened by time." "Can it be stopped?" she asked. "Perhaps, but not by force." She frowned. "Then how?" The light within the wall pulsed, as if with a heartbeat. "The castle was built on unity, the bond of 4 hearts, 4 wills. That bond must be remembered. Only balance can quiet what stirs." Alara thought hard. Unity, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, Slytherin, 4 founders, 4 virtues. She, a Ravenclaw, could not stand alone. "I'll need help," she murmured. The glow brightened, then slowly faded. 2 nights later, she gathered 3 of her colleagues in the Great Hall. Professor Harkness, brave and brash, a Gryffindor. Professor Blythe, patient and kind, a Hufflepuff. And Professor Varel, clever and cunning, a Slytherin. They stood before the enchanted floor, their wands raised as the castle's torches dimmed to a low, flickering light. "Each founder left a mark upon these stones," Alara said softly. "Tonight we restore that harmony." They formed a circle and began to chant the oldest incantation known to the school. Words of unity that predated written history. Magic thrummed through the hall, deep and resonant. The floor beneath them glowed faintly with the colors of the 4 houses: scarlet, gold, blue, and green. Far below, the sealed wall pulsed once, then twice, and then the frost vanished. The tremor ceased. A calm warmth spread through the air, carrying a faint whisper. "Well done." Alara felt tears prick her eyes. She looked up toward the enchanted ceiling where stars glittered beyond the clouds. The magic settled once more. The wards of Hogwarts were whole. When dawn came, the castle gleamed brighter than it had in years. The frost had melted, and sunlight streamed through the windows, catching in the glass like spilled gold. The great hall hummed with joy, laughter, chatter, and the rustle of owls bearing letters and sweets. Alara sat among her colleagues, weary but content. She knew the peace would hold for many years yet, and that evening when she walked alone by the frozen lake, the reflection of the setting sun caught her eye. For just a moment she saw him there again. Albus, smiling, the wind in his dark hair. "You listened," he he said. She smiled through tears. Always. The reflection faded with the light, leaving only the soft ripple of water beneath the ice and the lingering warmth in her heart. And though centuries might pass, though names would be forgotten and faces changed, the castle would remember the bond that had saved it again. A bond not of blood or house, but of courage, compassion, wisdom, and will. The spirit of Hogwarts lived on, stronger than ever, bound by those who had loved it most. Spring unfurled across the highlands once again, washing the world in green and gold. The towers of Hogwarts gleamed beneath a pale sunrise, their windows flashing like jewels in the early light. The winter storms had passed, and the castle, ancient, wise, and alive, stood quiet, watching, dreaming. Professor Alara Finch walked alone through the courtyard, her cloak stirring in the breeze. It had been nearly a year since the night she and the other professors had restored the balance of the old wards. Since then, peace had settled like a soft enchantment upon the school. Lessons had resumed, laughter filled the corridors once more, and no shadow had darkened the dungeons again. Yet Alara could still feel it, the heartbeat of the castle deep beneath her feet, slow and steady like the breath of something vast that slept, content beneath the earth. She paused by the lake. The ice had long since melted, and the water lay still as glass. Reflections of the towers shimmered across its surface, so clear that she could almost imagine another castle hidden beneath, the twin of the real, its windows filled with ghosts and memory. "Still keeping watch, aren't you?" she murmured. The ripples that followed were small but certain. Every spring she returned to this spot, not out of duty, but gratitude. It was here that she had first heard his voice, soft, steady, full of courage, the voice that had guided her through danger, that had reminded her that bravery did not mean the absence of fear, but the will to face it. The ghost of Albus Potter had become part of the school's legend. Students whispered his name now as they once had spoken of the Bloody Baron or the Grey Lady, but always with reverence rather than fear. He was the keeper of the reflection, the guardian who walked in glass and water. Some said they had seen him in the mirrors of the great hall on nights when the moon was full. Others swore his laughter still echoed through the dungeons when exams were near. Alara never corrected them. She smiled and said only, "The castle remembers what it loves." That morning she stood a long while by the water, the breeze tugging gently at her hair. Across the surface of the lake, the sun's reflection shimmered, and for just a heartbeat, she saw him again. He stood as he had always appeared, tall, dark-haired, eyes bright with quiet determination. The same faint smile she had seen all those years ago curved his lips. "Good morning, Professor Finch," said the voice that had once guided her. Alara felt her breath catch, though she was no longer startled by such visitations. "You've been quiet," she said softly. "I wondered if you'd gone." "I never go," said the reflection. "Not truly. The castle keeps me close." She smiled faintly. "And you're content? After all these years?" He tilted his head, studying her. "Contentment is a strange word. I am not alive, nor am I lost. I am part of what endures. When students find courage, when teachers stand together, when laughter fills these halls, I am there." Alara looked down at the water, where his face wavered and reformed with every ripple. "It's a good place to stay." "It is," he agreed. "And it is yours now, too." She frowned slightly. "Mine?" "The castle listens to you," said Albus. "It always has. You hear it, don't you? The hum in the walls, the breath in the air. She hesitated, then nodded. I do. That is the gift it gives those who serve it with love. The same gift it once gave me. The reflection brightened, the light around him pulsing like sunlight through deep water. A time will come when others will need to listen, as you once did. You must teach them. Alara's heart stirred. Teach them what? He smiled. To trust the castle, to trust one another. The light grew stronger until it filled her vision, blinding and golden. She blinked, and when her eyes cleared, the reflection was gone. Only the lake remained, quiet, endless, peaceful. She stood there a long while, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. That summer Hogwarts was more alive than ever. Wildflowers carpeted the hills. Owls wheeled lazily through the bright blue sky, and laughter echoed from the green lawns. The students were preparing for the end-of-year feast, and the great hall glittered with floating candles and garlands of ivy and stars. Alara sat at the staff table, her gaze drifting often to the enchanted ceiling. Beyond its illusion of twilight, the real sky was streaked with pink and violet. The voices of hundreds of students rose in cheerful chaos. For the first time in many years, there was no unease beneath their joy. The headmistress rose to speak. This year, she said, her voice carrying easily over the noise, marks the anniversary of Hogwarts' founding. Over 1,000 years of magic, of courage, and of friendship. But I remind you that this castle's truest strength has never lain in its walls or spells. It lies in those who call it home. The students fell silent, listening. This school remembers every hand that has raised a wand to defend it, every heart that has loved it, every spirit that has given itself to protect what we cherish most. The ghosts who walk among us are not relics of sorrow. They are the guardians of our joy. Alara felt the words echo through her, as though the very stones beneath her seat were nodding in agreement. She looked toward the far end of the hall, where the great mirrors behind the staff table reflected the candlelight. For a moment she saw them, shadows of those long gone, the founders themselves, their figures half formed in gold and silver. Rose and Scorpius standing beside the boy who had saved them, generations of teachers and students, their faces serene and proud. And at the center of them all, Albus Potter, smiling quietly, the reflection of the flames dancing in his eyes. He lifted a hand as if in farewell or blessing. Alara blinked and the vision faded. The mirrors showed only the glitter of the feast once more. She rose, lifting her goblet in a silent toast to the empty air. To those who keep watch, she whispered. The torches flickered as if stirred by a wind, though no draft moved through the hall. Somewhere deep within the castle, a soft hum began, steady and content, the sound of a living fortress breathing. Years turned again, as years must. New students came, old ones departed. Professors aged and were replaced, yet the legend never died. They said that if you stood by the lake at dawn, you might see two reflections instead of one. They said that on nights when thunder rolled over the castle, faint laughter echoed through the dungeons, and the mirrors in the great hall gleamed brighter for a heartbeat. And some swore that when courage was needed, true courage, the kind that came from love, the castle itself would awaken, and the spirit of its guardian would walk again among the living. No one ever proved those stories. No one needed to. For in Hogwarts, belief was its own kind of magic, and somewhere within that ancient heart of stone and spell, the ghost who had once been the most terrifying of all walked quietly through the light, his duty fulfilled, his spirit at peace. He was not a ghost anymore. He was a promise kept. And Hogwarts, beloved, eternal Hogwarts, kept him as it kept all who had ever loved him.